Hi, I'm Kirsten, founder of Natural Wellness Living, and today I'm going to show you how to make bread out of natural yeast. For thousands of years, people made bread from scratch using natural yeast, and it worked great. It was only last century that artificial yeast was introduced, and then we started having all of these problems like gluten intolerance and other issues, and people think, oh, wheat's the bad guy, we need to stay away from wheat and grains, and that's not the case. It's not the wheat, it's what we're doing to it. And so in my first video where we talked about what natural yeast is and how to use it, and we did a little waffle demo, I explained a little bit more about why natural yeast is so important, because it breaks down the glutens in the wheat to safe levels, and it raises your bread naturally, and it becomes a probiotic source because it's just fermented flour and water, and as that works through your dough, it cultures it. So it's really an amazing thing to put into your body. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about wheat. Now wheat, like I said, is not the bad guy. It's what we do to the wheat that is bad. For thousands of years, wheat was harvested just at the sprouting point. Just in the moment when it was starting to sprout, then it was harvested. And that was so important because at that moment of sprouting is this huge nutrition burst. And the phytic acids in the wheat are reduced, and the starch is reduced, and the nutrition is increased in the moment of sprouting. But with modern mechanized harvesting methods, where we have big machines going through and harvesting the fields, the machines are too rough on the gentle sprouted wheat. They ruin it. So now we harvest wheat right before it's sprouted, right before that amazing burst of nutrition. We harvest it. It's like picking a green peach. And we do that a lot too, or green tomatoes. We do that a lot too. But the real nutrition comes in the tree ripened fruit, or the vine ripened tomatoes, and it comes in the sprouted wheat too. So if you can get wheat that has been sprouted, you get that extra nutrition, you get that nutritional burst, you get the reduced phytic acid. Some people say phytic acid is like the anti-nutrient because it inhibits your body from absorbing nutrients. So if you can get wheat that's sprouted, then it has less of that bad phytic acid, less starch, more nutrients. So that's one way we've been doing wheat wrong. On my website, you will see I have a link for organic sprouted wheat, and that's where I get mine. And it's not meant to be cheap, but really good things are never cheap. It's still about the same price as if you go to a bakery and buy an artisan loaf of bread. It's about the same price. So then you say, wait, why am I making it myself instead of getting it at the bakery? But I've never found a bakery that uses organic sprouted grains 100% in their breads with natural yeast. Never found it. So that's why you're doing it. You're giving your family the very, very best, and you're having that amazing opportunity of grinding and baking at home. Let's talk about grinding. This is a wheat grinder. I ground my wheat before for you because the wheat grinder is really noisy. I'll show you. So I'll turn it on. You have to turn it on and then put the wheat in so it doesn't jam. So you get the grindstones going, and then you pour the wheat in, and it works really well. So I'll just show you real quick how loud it is. Oh, thought we were plugged in here. Hang on. See if that works. There we go. Okay. So when it gets quiet, it's done and you can turn it off. Okay, so that's how you grind wheat. And I've got this full bowl of ground wheat. But it's so important to grind your wheat fresh. So even if you could buy organic sprouted grain flour, I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend grinding fresh, even though it's kind of noisy and it's a little bit more work. When wheat is fresh ground, it has all the nutrients. Once it's exposed to air and light and a warmer temperature, it starts to lose its nutrients, and it quickly loses them. Ground flour becomes rancid in about 3 days. You can still use it, it won't hurt you, but it has natural oils in it, and once those are exposed to air and light, it just starts to be not as fresh. So if you want a really good fresh taste and also a wheat that's going to raise really well in your natural yeast bread, grind it fresh. It's the best, most wholesome, nutritious way to do it. So this is how I make my natural yeast bread. And I never measure, I just dump in, but I'm gonna measure just for you. So here's my yeast. I just keep it in a crock in the fridge. You cover it loosely. You don't want it to be airtight because it's a living, breathing thing. And I've had it out of the fridge a couple hours to warm up so that it's ready to make this bread. It's really bubbly. And I just kind of stir it to stir out bubbles, mix it up a bit. It's nice and elasticy. I can tell it's ready to go. It's gonna make really good bread for me. And so I'm just going to put in my mixer here a cup of the natural yeast. Here we go. I do like a big heaping cup. And just put it in there. Kind of sloppy, it's okay. And then I add my warm water. And I forgot to get my warm water cup. Let me grab that. But we do about 5 cups of warm water. Again, you don't have to measure, but about 5 cups of warm will raise 1 start of natural yeast. So let me grab that. Okay. And we've got that in, and now we use, well, we dump in the flour. And I already ground a bowl of flour for you. Oh, but first the coconut sugar. I knew I was forgetting something. The coconut sugar, I love this. It smells to me like bread when you smell it. It says, make bread with me. Now, why coconut sugar? You can use any sugar. You can use refined sugar, you can use brown sugar. It will raise your bread just fine. But the coconut sugar has a lower glycemic index. And a lower glycemic index means it's not gonna spike your blood sugar. So it's better for people who have issues with diabetes, other things. When you eat foods with a low glycemic index, your body produces more digestive hormones, which keeps you full longer. So people say sugar makes you hungry. That's why, because when you eat high glycemic index, your body produces fewer digestive hormones, and then you're hungry again really fast. So this is a good bread that will really fill you up. So I like to use the coconut sugar with the low glycemic index that just smells so yummy. It says make bread with me. And I put this in first with my starch because it, the yeast loves the sugar. It kind of like wakes it up first thing if you just put it in, and I just stir it real quick for 1 minute, kind of get that yeast and sugar around, and it's bubbling up in here really nicely. The yeast says, I love this sugar. So I do that first. And then I get the flour. I've got 2 bowls going here because it takes about that much. And again, I don't really measure, but your trick is you're going to want to add enough flour that the bowl cleans, that the sides of the bowl clean themselves. So I'm gonna hold back on all of it. We'll see how it does. But once your Bosch is going, and I love the Bosch. I don't use the KitchenAid. The Bosch has so much more horsepower. So I highly recommend a Bosch. I've got a link for that on my website as well. But once you get that, what am I trying to say? Once you get your flour in, then I put in the oil and the salt. I don't put the salt right in the water because I don't want it to kind of start attacking the yeast. The yeast needs a good environment, so I put it on top of the wheat at the end. So I use about 1/4 cup of oil. This is going to make 3 loaves of bread. Now you think 3, maybe I only need 1. No, you really need 3. You need 1 for eating, 1 for freezing, so instead of the next time you need it, and 1 for sharing. Because if you make bread that's amazing, your neighbors are gonna want it, and it'd be the best neighbor ever. So that's how I do mine. I do 1 for eating, 1 for freezing, and 1 for sharing every time. Okay, and then I'm going to do a tablespoon of salt. I use real salt. This is Redmond salt. Any kind of natural salt, pink salt. There are a lot of natural salts out there. Start reading the ingredients on your salt. If you thought you were just buying salt, there are a lot of other things that people add into salt that your body doesn't need. So, and this just has such an incredible, deep, rich flavor. So I use this salt, and I use kind of a heaping tablespoon of it. Put that on my flour before I mix it. And then I like just a little bit of honey. Something about it just gives the bread that nice homemade taste. You don't have to use it. The coconut sugar's enough to make it so it doesn't taste like a sourdough loaf. This natural yeast is the same concept as sourdough, but your bread doesn't have to taste sour. If you're baking with natural yeast, you can just use a little coconut sugar, or make sure that your start is always fresh and well fed. It doesn't have to be a sour taste, but I like the way the honey kind of balances this recipe. So let me grab my honey. Here we go. And I'm just gonna put in about a tablespoon of honey. You don't want too much honey because it makes it too dense, but a little bit of taste is really, really nice in there. And I always buy raw, unfiltered honey. Raw has more nutrients and there's nothing refined out of it, so that's the best way to go on the honey. And then I'm gonna just turn this on and mix it up, and I'm going to watch if it's cleaning the sides itself. Let's see. Okay, so it is. I wasn't quite sure if it was going to, but it's cleaning it. The sides are all nice and white. There's no gooey, sticky dough on them. So that means I put in the right amount. Now the next thing you need to do is to run this on low for 8 minutes exactly. And it's going to knead your bread and do a really good job of just developing that gluten. So just let it knead for 8 minutes. Do not put it on high. You cannot speed this process. If you put it on high, it will generate so much heat, it will kill your yeast. So don't do that. Put it on just low and go for 8 minutes, and then I just let it sit in here. A lot of people take their dough out and put it in a bowl and cover it with plastic wrap. I just let it sit in here. It's really easy. And when it gets to the top, the very top, when it raises that much, that's about doubled, and then I know it's ready to put in pans. And depending on the health of my start and when was the last time I used it, and how bubbly it is, that may take 5 hours to double, and it may take 10 hours. The recipe that I originally got said 12. It just kind of depends on your start. So a good rule of thumb is, if you want bread for dinner, start it in the morning. And if you want bread in the morning, start it in the evening, and then it'll be just fine. But when it doubles, then that's when you take it out and put it in bread pans. Oh, let me show you my pans. I use these stoneware bread pans. I like the crispiness that it gives the bread. It never burns. It just bakes really nice and evenly. There's a link for these on my website as well. There's also a way to do a European loaf. You can use a Dutch oven and heat the Dutch oven at 450 in your oven till it's hot, and then you pull it out and you put your raised dough in the Dutch oven, and then put it back in covered for a half hour, and then take the lid off for the last 15 minutes and turn the temperature down to 400 for that last 15, and it's amazing. That'll give it like the nice crispy European crust. My family dislikes a regular traditional loaf. I'll show you what it looks like inside. It's not super fluffy, but it's not super dense either. It's got nice holes, has a nice light color. I use the white wheat. Some people say that red wheat has a few more nutrients, but it's a little bitter too. So when you use red wheat, you have to add white flour, and I don't like adding white flour. So if I use all white wheat, I can use 100% wheat. I don't have to add anything. So I like this color, I like this consistency. My kids won't eat anything else. They won't eat nice breads from a bread shop. They won't eat anybody else's bread. They certainly won't eat a bread from a plastic loaf bag that's pre-sliced in the store. They will only eat this, and it's really good, and it makes amazing toast. So that's how it looks if you cook it in the stoneware pans. So what you're going to do after your bread has doubled, then you put it into these pans And you just form loaves. You don't have to knead it out on flour or anything. I just grab the dough out. I put it in these pans. This is enough. This recipe makes 3 pans. And so it'll fill the pans, that'll be about an inch, it'll go about an inch down. And you just pat it in there. Butter the pans first. That's really important. Butter your pans. And butter works best. Don't try to use olive oil. But organic butter is a good fat. It has a different composition from regular butter. It won't hurt your heart. Butter the pans and the bread will come out better. So let it rise till double. Butter your bread pans. Put the dough in the pans. Even if it doesn't look beautiful, just pat it down in there. I just grab it out, shape it into a little ball, put it in the pans, and then I cover those pans, these stoneware loaf pans, with a towel, a tea towel, for about 2.5 hours. And you can tell when it's ready to go in the oven because the bread starts pushing up on the towel. It's got a little bump there. Like, okay. So then you turn the oven on to 350. You put the bread in and bake until it's done. I like mine pretty brown, so we go about 50 minutes, 5-0. But you'll have to watch yours. Every oven's different. And depending on where you get your wheat and how you're using it and what your start looks like, every start is different. That's why sometimes it drives them crazy that I don't have exact measurements, but every wheat is different and the start is different every day. And you just have to learn the tips, which is it's enough flour when the side cleans itself, and it's done when it's nice and brown on top. So just learn to watch for these hints, and your bread will be amazing. And your family will love you, and your neighbors will love you, and your body will love you. This is one of the best things you can eat. This is the right way to do wheat, and your body will really appreciate it. Wheat is supposed to be the staff of life, and this is how you make that happen. I just wanted to show you a lot of what I learned. I learned from this book. It's called The Art of Baking with Natural Yeast. And when my sister gave me this book, I had no idea that the yeast I was using wasn't natural. I was just using that powdery stuff you buy in the grocery store. And this just opened up a whole new world for me. It's been a great book. And so I have a link for this on my website as well. I would recommend The Art of Baking with Natural Yeast. And you'll be able to find a lot of other recipes out there on the internet. But hopefully this little video just helps you get comfortable using natural yeast and starting to experiment with it. So happy baking and stay well. Thank you.